Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. You know, what they wanted to do in this last year was make me the only lieutenant governor in national history to be recalled. But what they did, thanks to your attention and your prayers, and I know some of you even contributed, thanks to your donations, you made me the only lieutenant governor in national history to be elected twice in my own first term. But friends, the bigger credit, of course, goes to the man who is now well known as the tip of the spear for the reform governors movement across this country, Governor Scott Walker. You know, what we did in Wisconsin was not to pick a fight with Goliath, but he came with his big money and big muscle. The big public sector union bosses, they came to Wisconsin. What we did was never supposed to cause a storm. It was supposed to calm the one that we saw coming. See, the previous administration's parting gift to the people of the great state of Wisconsin was a $3.6 billion budget deficit. $3.6 billion. We had pressure coming at us from the past. But we had pressure coming at us from the future, too, because when we looked out ahead, we saw that we had rising health care costs and a runaway pension liability that, if left unchecked, was going to bankrupt our children's future, their shot at prosperity in their Wisconsin. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. And I wouldn't just fail my little daughters as a leader, but I would have failed them as a mom if I had not stood with Governor Scott Walker in agreeing that we needed to fix that $3.6 billion budget deficit, and we needed to do it without raising taxes. And so in Wisconsin, when we faced the tough decision of whether to do the right thing, the grown-up thing, or to kick the can down the road to our kids, look our little ones in the face and say, "Sweeties, we love you, just not that much," we chose to lead. In Wisconsin, we chose to lead. We chose, but that was not the first time in my life that I chose. You know, we all make choices in our lives, but the fact of the matter is, I made a couple of tough choices back in 2010. 2 years ago, and when people ask me how my family made it through the last year and a half, I tell them that I was uniquely prepared to deal with what Wisconsin went through. Because, see, 2 years ago, I was one of the millions of moms sitting on the couch with her kids, yelling at the TV and the loser politicians that weren't out there protecting my children's futures, until I realized that perhaps, as many women in America realize, that if I want something done, sometimes you have to stand up and what, ladies? Do it yourself. See, I'm not the only one. Phyllis, we're not. Others know that. And so I decided to throw my hat into the ring. My first ever political race. I was 35 with 2 little girls in a 5-way primary with 4 men who had done this before. And I was not exactly the pick of the litter. Certainly wasn't the pick of the political insiders, but at my state convention I was first voted off the endorsement ballot, and then 2 weeks before my primary, I was diagnosed with a grapefruit-sized tumor in my gut. 12 days before my primary, I had my colon cancer removed. And then on the day of my election, I was released from the hospital just in time to vote for myself and get to my victory party where I beat the guys by 22 points. And I beat the cancer, too. It was about 3 months into chemotherapy when the union bosses came. And at that point, they were incredibly frustrated with the fact that we had made the choice. We had made Wisconsin a more prosperous place for our children to grow up and live their American dreams in. See, we had made some tough decisions in our budget, but one of those tough decisions was to ask our public employees to pay a share, just a share, of their own benefits. And we also made some changes to collective bargaining. Collective bargaining. The process by which a bus driver was making $150,000 a year in Wisconsin. The process by which taxpayers were paying tens of millions of dollars more than they should have for health insurance because school districts couldn't put it out for a bid. Collective bargaining. The process by which unions filed grievances against a senior citizen school crossing guard and inmates mowing medians because volunteers and inmates were non-union. They were upset because we had made the tough decision. In Wisconsin, we knew that it was not us versus them. It was us for our kids. But in order to move our state forward, our state motto, we would have to move forward with reform. Well, the big public sector union bosses, they weren't having that. But the law was proceeding. And I would tell you that today it is the law of the land because the fact of the matter is we have saved hundreds of millions of dollars on our reforms. But the fact of the matter is that 1 week ago to this day, one judge in the most liberal county in the state of Wisconsin handed down an opinion that our law, which had made businesses prosper and saved taxpayers money, was unconstitutional. Well, I have an opinion too. And my opinion is that there will be no one judge who will steamroll the will of the people in Wisconsin by legislating from the bench. And so the good news is we have filed for a stay, and we have filed an appeal, and if we have to fight to the highest court in the land, this law and the will of Wisconsin will be upheld. That's the good news. The bad news is the reason they do this is to bring chaos upon the taxpayers and chaos into the budget process of the counties and the municipalities and the school districts of the state of Wisconsin. The same type of chaos that they hoped to bring to the state capitol when they were protesting. And they did protest. You remember the video on the nightly news. Friends, they came by planes, trains, and automobiles all across our state capitol. They had to shut down schools. There were so many teachers calling in sick so they could hold protest signs. Others banged on drums. Some played on their vuvuzelas. They spit on our staff. They threatened our lives. Michael Moore and Jesse Jackson came. Our Senate Democrats left. And long about midwinter, when the union bosses had decided that they would try one last grasp at the power of their past, they decided they would recall us. They spent their winter gathering signatures. We spent our winter gathering endurance. When they talked about the fact that Wisconsin was the birthplace of the public sector union, we quietly remembered that Wisconsin is also the birthplace of the grand old party. Sure. That endurance, though, was important because even though the governor and I were elected together on a ticket in fall of 2010, we realized late in the game that under our Constitution, through a quirk, we would be recalled separately. Endurance. Then, in a race right out of central casting, they told us that they were going to run a statewide union boss against me. Endurance. But that's the thing about endurance. Leads to strength. Strength leads to character. Character to hope. Romans 5:3-4. Absolutely. We had a plan based on that hope. the hope of a prosperous Wisconsin. The plan that had saved taxpayers' money for the first time in 12 years, that had created 30,000 jobs. That was our plan, and we had executed. We had a plan, and we had the guts to execute. And that's a lot of guts, because I only have half a colon. We had a plan, and they had none. And so when the voters went to the polls on June 5th in that recall election, the taxpayers, the hardworking families, the moms, dads, grandmas, and grandpas, the young people of Wisconsin rose up and said, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with those who stood shoulder to shoulder with us. And Wisconsin stood for courage. That night we won by a wider margin than we had when we were elected in 2010. Sure. I said that night that the campaign to save America began in Wisconsin. And I hope that that is very true, that we are able to donate a thread to the fabric of the big tent that makes the Republican Party. I hope that we are able to contribute our story to the great story of the American ideal. You know, in Wisconsin, we have fought the good fight. We've run the race, we've kept the faith. And I hope that in Wisconsin, you are as proud as I am that we are also able to contribute one of our favorite sons, Paul Ryan, to be the next Vice President of the United States. And so I ask you tonight to please help continue the Wisconsin story and stand with Governor Mitt Romney and Congressman Paul Ryan. Please keep the faith. Be the warriors who will win this battle for America's soul, and be their Gideon's army. Keep the faith and be loud as heck. Thank you guys so much for having me here this afternoon. May God bless you. God bless America. Sure, absolutely.
What a great start for Eva Council. We're so proud of you, Rebecca. Proud of your victory, proud of your endurance, and she will take a couple of questions. If you would please go to the mic in the center aisle. And if you have any questions, but it certainly is a wonderful testimony of sticking with it and winning. That's what we want to hear.
Winning is always good.
Rebecca, would you elaborate on the understanding that I think is missing for many American people about the fact that a public employee, when he negotiates, is also negotiating with somebody who doesn't have that money himself, but is there because of he's in an elective office. And that when they do this kind of negotiation, it's really kind of a one-sided thing all along. Would you address that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's part of the undue influence that we have noticed over time that these public sector employee unions have. We know overwhelmingly that the union dues go to contribute to Democrat campaign funds. And obviously, it would be very difficult to divorce yourself from the fact that there are a lot of contributors whose causes you believe in who would like to see you continue that belief in elected office. That's why I think it's very dangerous that those are the folks doing the negotiations. Now, you are going to hear tomorrow, I believe, from Mallory Factor, who just wrote an extraordinary book called Shadow Bosses. He uncovers a remarkable amount about public sector union bosses and their undue influence on the politicians of America. We need to be very careful, folks, about which politicians we're electing. You know, in Wisconsin, we choose to call the good guys statesmen. Let's make sure that we're properly vetting the folks we hold up as America's leaders. Thanks, good question.
I can't tell you how encouraging it is for someone like myself who has held office for 27 years.
Congratulations.
Well,
They like you.
the community does. I'm not sure about the board that I sit on. But I just welcome you and your encouragement. My question to you is, I am now in my 7th term, and I will have completed 28 years as an elected countywide official only for our local community college. I see what is going on. I clearly stand alone, and I am not afraid to stand up. I admire your courage and your endurance. And I wonder if you have any words of encouragement at this point. I'm looking at things in California, and it looks pretty dire at this point, and there's much mischief going on, and I just wonder, I have another, my term is not yet over, so I just wondered what,
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that you've done so well in continued public office. You know, we need more leaders around this country, sorry gentlemen, who are women. I sit on the board of Right Women right now, where we are targeting 150 races in this country in a great effort to get more women elected who believe in traditional values and frugality and moderation as fiscal responsibility. And so it's terrific that you are still there. So proud that you have a long record of public service. But the encouragement that I would offer to everyone here today is simply take a look at our neighbor to the south, Illinois. Who's here from Illinois? All right, I'm gonna rip a little bit, but it's not gonna hurt that bad. Okay, oh, she said it was okay. All right, so I won't talk about the Bears and I won't talk about the Cubs because I know those are already probably sore subjects between us. But I will say this about our neighbor to the south, Illinois. We have a fully funded retirement system in Wisconsin. We have the best retirement system in the country, according to Pew Research. That's because of the reforms that we put in place last year. You compare that to Illinois, which is quickly slipping the way of California, which is quickly slipping the way of Greece, which is very greasy. That's a slippery slope right there. Illinois right now has $80 billion in unfunded pension liability. Yesterday, Governor Quinn came out announcing, you know what I'm going to say, that in his budget, his next budget for his state, he is putting in the hope of a federal guarantee that they're going to back up his pension liability. Ladies and gentlemen of America, do you want to pay for Illinois' mistakes? She said she didn't want to pay for them. She lives there. We can't have leaders like that. It's tough in Illinois. It's tough. It's a very Democrat state. But we saw even just this past week and a half with the Chicago Teachers Union strike that even Democrats, even for a moment, Rahm Emanuel